The notification flashed across my phone screen while I sat at my desk reviewing intelligence reports. Home security system. Motion detected in home office. I pulled up the camera feed and my blood turned to ice. My parents were standing in my private workspace. My mother holding my work laptop, the one containing classified files I had accidentally left at home that morning. I watched in horror as she scrolled through documents, passing the screen toward my father. I grabbed my phone and dialed home, my hands shaking. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and light. "Just sharing your boring government work," she said dismissively. "Nothing important here." Through the camera, I could see my father positioning documents on my scanner. My heart stopped. Without a word, I pressed the security alert button on my phone. Within minutes, response teams would be breaching all entrances to my house. I ran from the office, coffee spilling across my desk, my chair spinning behind me. My colleague Jennifer called after me, but I didn't stop. I threw myself into my car and drove toward home at a speed that defied every traffic law. My phone rang. It was Christopher Hayes, my supervisor, his voice sharp with urgency. "Georgia, what's happening?" "My parents are in my house," I gasped, weaving through traffic. "They have my laptop, the classified laptop. They're accessing files right now." There was a pause that felt like eternity. "How did they get in?" "I don't know. I didn't give them keys." "Christopher, those files contain intelligence on foreign operatives currently active on U.S. soil. If anyone gets that information, people will die." "Response teams are mobilizing now. How far are you?" 10 minutes. "Drive carefully. We'll handle this." His voice softened slightly. "Georgia, why was the laptop at home?" The question I had been dreading. "I worked late last night, past midnight. I was exhausted. I planned to bring it in first thing this morning, but I forgot it when I left for work at 6. I never thought anyone would be in my house. My parents live in Dallas. That's a 3-hour drive. They never visit without calling first." Christopher was quiet for a moment. "Get there safely. We'll sort this out." He disconnected and pressed harder on the accelerator. My mind raced through the files on that laptop. Operation Northbridge, the task force tracking Viktor Vulov's network, names of informants, safe house locations, surveillance photographs, everything we knew about foreign intelligence operations on American soil. If the wrong people accessed that information, our entire network would collapse. Assets would be compromised, lives would end. I screeched into my driveway 5 minutes before the response teams arrived. The house looked peaceful, ordinary, exactly as I had left it that morning. I burst through the front door, chest heaving, and ran straight to my home office. My parents stood there, startled, but not particularly concerned. My mother, Linda, held my laptop, the screen still glowing with classified documents. My father, Robert, stood beside my scanner, several pages already processed and sitting in the output tray. "Georgia," Mom smiled with that warm maternal smile I'd known my entire life. "Honey, we just wanted to see what you've been working so hard on. You never talk about your job. We thought if we understood what you do, we could help support you better." I crossed the room in 2 strides and yanked the laptop from her hands. My fingers flew across the keyboard, checking the access history. My stomach dropped. 15 different files opened, hundreds of pages scrolled through. The timestamps showed they had been there for over 2 hours. "Why?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Why would you do this?" My father stepped forward, his expression earnest. "Your mother is right, Georgia. We're your parents. We have the right to know what's consuming your life. You work 80-hour weeks. You barely sleep. We worry about you." "This is classified information," I said, my voice rising. "Federal law. You just committed espionage. Do you understand that?" "Don't be dramatic," Mom said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's just paperwork, government bureaucracy, nothing important." But I wasn't looking at my mother anymore. My eyes had caught something on my father's scanner. This wasn't the basic home scanner I owned. The device sitting on my desk was a sophisticated, military-grade model with encryption capabilities built into its display panel. I had seen equipment like this before, in secure government facilities. My gaze shifted to my mother's purse sitting open on my desk chair. Inside, I glimpsed a USB drive, but not an ordinary one. The casing had a specific design, a secure encryption drive used by intelligence agencies. My mind reeled. I looked back at my laptop screen, studying the pattern of access. The cursor movements weren't random browsing. They were systematic, methodical, searching for specific information. This wasn't curious parents trying to understand their daughter's work. This was a targeted intelligence operation. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My parents hadn't stumbled into this. They had planned it. Sirens wailed outside, growing louder. In the space of 5 seconds, my front and back doors exploded inward simultaneously. 6 agents from Homeland Security and the FBI stormed through my house, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Hands up, nobody move. Agent Palmer led the breach, his face set in hard lines. 2 agents immediately moved toward my parents, forcing them to their knees, hands behind their backs. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed in my small office. My mother started crying. "Georgia, what are you doing? We're your family. How could you call the police on us?" My father's face transformed with anger. "This is how you treat your parents? We raised you, sacrificed everything for you, and this is what we get?" But I saw something else in my father's eyes. For just 1 second, when the agents grabbed him, his expression shifted. The anger disappeared, replaced by something cool and professional. The look of a trained operative, not a frightened civilian. Then it was gone, hidden again behind the mask of an outraged father. Agent Palmer approached me. "Miss Georgia, are you all right?" I nodded, unable to speak. "We need you to step outside while we secure the scene. Agent Morrison will take your statement." I walked out of my office on shaking legs. Behind me, I heard my mother's sobs and my father's angry protests. I stepped into my living room, the place where I had hosted family dinners, where we had laughed and shared stories, and I felt the foundation of my entire life cracking beneath my feet. Agent Sarah Morrison sat across from me at my dining room table, her notebook open, her expression carefully neutral. Through the walls, I could hear my parents being questioned in separate rooms. My house had become a crime scene. Every room crawling with federal agents, evidence markers being placed, photographs being taken. "Walk me through this morning," Sarah said. Her voice was kind, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. I explained everything. The late-night work session, my exhaustion, forgetting the laptop, the unexpected arrival of my parents. Sarah wrote quickly, her pen moving across the page. "When was the last time your parents visited unannounced?" I thought about it. Never. They always call at least a week in advance. They like to plan. My mother makes a whole itinerary when they visit. "Did they have keys to your house?" "No. I never gave them spares. I live alone. I work in intelligence. I'm careful about security." Sarah's pen paused. "Then how did they get in?" That question hung in the air between us. Sarah pulled out her tablet and showed me security footage from my front porch camera. I watched my father approach my door at 7:45 that morning, barely an hour after I had left for work. He knelt before my lock, and his hands moved with practiced efficiency. In 15 seconds, my door swung open. No fumbling, no hesitation, professional lock-picking. "Your father has training," Sarah observed, could not speak. I watched him on the screen, his movements confident and skilled. And I saw a stranger wearing my father's face. The tech team entered carrying evidence bags. Inside one was my father's scanner, and another was the USB drive from my mother's purse. A young agent named Thomas approached Sarah. "You need to see this," he said, his voice tight. We followed him to my office, now filled with equipment and investigators. Thomas pointed to his laptop screen, showing the analysis of the scanner. This device doesn't just scan documents. It transmits data in real time to an encrypted server. Everything they scanned was immediately uploaded. My vision swam. "Where? What server?" "We're tracing it now, but the encryption is sophisticated, government level." Sarah turned to the USB drive analysis. Another tech, A woman named Patricia looked pale as she delivered her findings. This drive contains malware, advanced spyware designed to infiltrate secure systems. We also found a keystroke logger on Miss George's laptop. It was installed 3 days ago. 3 days ago? I felt the room spinning. 3 days ago, I had brought my laptop home to work on a weekend briefing. 3 days ago, my father had called to check in, asking if I was home. A casual call, a loving father checking on his daughter. I had told him yes, that I was working from home that day. The malware was installed remotely, Patricia continued. Someone accessed your laptop from outside your network and deployed the keystroke logger. Every stroke you've typed since then has been recorded and transmitted. Sarah looked at me, her expression grim. Georgia, this isn't a random breach. This is a coordinated intelligence operation that's been running for at least 3 days, possibly much longer. Agent Palmer appeared in the doorway. We need you in the interrogation room. Agent Morrison and Georgia, you should hear this too. We walked down my hallway to my guest bedroom, now converted into a makeshift interrogation space. My father sat in a chair, his hands cuffed to the table. He looked different now. The warm, gentle father I knew was gone. The man sitting before me was cold, controlled, his eyes calculating. Your father has something to say, Palmer said. Robert looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of arrest or prosecution, but fear for someone else. I did it for Daniel, he said quietly. Daniel? My older brother. My stomach clenched. What about Daniel? I asked. My father took a deep breath. Your brother never quit gambling. He's in debt to loan sharks, $1,200,000. These aren't ordinary loan sharks, Georgia. They have connections to organized crime networks. They threatened to kill him. The room went silent. I thought about Daniel, living in Dallas, working as a sales manager for a tech company. I had spoken to him just last week. He sounded fine, normal, maybe a bit stressed, but nothing alarming. 6 months ago, Robert continued, a man named Marcus Thornton approached me. He knew about Daniel's debt. He offered to make it disappear, all of it. In exchange, he wanted information, classified information from you. You said no, I whispered, needing it to be true. I did at first. Then they sent me a video. My father's voice broke. They had Daniel in a warehouse. They broke his fingers, Georgia, one by one while he screamed. They said next time it would be worse. Next time they'd send pieces of him to us in boxes. Sarah leaned forward. When did you agree? 2 years ago. 2 years. I felt the floor drop away from me. 2 years of betrayal. 2 years of my father stealing classified information, putting lives at risk, destroying everything I had worked for. Your mother doesn't know, Robert said quickly. I told her we were just trying to understand your work. She thought this was about being supportive parents. Linda is innocent in this. Palmer crossed his arms. Who is Marcus Thornton working for? I don't know. He never said, but the equipment he gave me, the USB drives, the scanner, they're intelligence grade. Whoever's behind this has significant resources and connections. Sarah pulled out her phone, already running a search for Marcus Thornton. Within seconds, she had results. She turned the screen toward me. Marcus Thornton, 52 years old, businessman with import and export companies. But as I scrolled through his business connections, patterns emerged. 5 different companies with foreign ownership, multiple contracts with defense contractors, financial ties to offshore accounts. He's a facilitator, I said, the pieces clicking together.
He positions himself to access sensitive information from multiple sources. My father isn't his only asset. Palmer nodded. We'll bring Thornton in for questioning immediately. I looked at my father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had attended every school event, who had told me he was proud when I joined Homeland Security. You could have come to us, to the agency. We protect witnesses. We could have helped Daniel. They said they had people inside, Robert replied. They said that if I reported it, they would know, and Daniel would die. The door opened and Christopher Hayes entered. His face was drawn, exhausted. He had driven here from headquarters and carried the weight of this disaster in his posture. Georgia, he said quietly, I need to speak with you alone. We walked to my kitchen. Christopher leaned against the counter, and when he looked at me, I saw something in his expression that terrified me. Internal Affairs is opening an investigation, he said, into you. The words didn't make sense. They need to determine whether you were aware of your father's activities, whether you deliberately left your laptop accessible. That's insane. I'm the victim here. I know, but look at the timeline from their perspective. You forgot your laptop at home, which you never do. Your parents showed up unannounced, which they never do. The timing is too convenient. Some agents are asking whether you facilitated this breach. I felt rage burning through my shock. I would never betray my country. You know me, Christopher. You've worked with me for 5 years. I do know you. I believe you. But I have to follow protocol. Effective immediately. You're suspended pending investigation. I need your badge and your weapon. My hands shook as I removed my badge from my belt and my service weapon from its holster. I placed them on the counter between us. 5 years of dedication, of sacrifice, of sleepless nights protecting this country, and now I was being treated like a criminal. Don't leave the city, Christopher said. You'll be called in for questioning. Cooperate fully. Tell the truth. If you're innocent, the investigation will prove it. If I was innocent, the conditional stabbed through me. Christopher left, and I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to agents process my home, my life, my family. Through the window, I saw news vans arriving, cameras pointing at my house. Someone had leaked the story. By morning, my name and face would be everywhere, attached to words like espionage, betrayal, treason. The interrogations began the next morning. I sat in a cold, windowless room at Homeland Security headquarters, facing 2 internal affairs investigators who looked at me like I was already guilty. They asked the same questions over and over, circling back, trying to catch inconsistencies. Why did you take classified files home? I've explained this. I worked late. I was tired. I planned to bring the laptop in first thing. But you forgot. Yes. You've never forgotten before. In 5 years, you've never once left classified materials unsecured. Everyone makes mistakes. Convenient timing for a mistake. The sessions lasted hours, grinding me down, searching for cracks. They analyzed every aspect of my life, my phone records, my emails, my travel history. They built a timeline of every interaction I'd had with my family over the past 2 years. They discovered that I had called Daniel 13 times in the past month, significantly more than usual. When I explained I was worried about my brother and wanted to...
At check-in, they made notes with skeptical expressions. They discovered that I had visited Dallas 3 times in the past 6 months to see my family. Each time, I had brought my laptop to work remotely. The investigators theorized that I had been gradually exposing information to my family over time, normalizing their access and preparing for the larger breach. That's not what happened, I insisted, but I could see they didn't believe me. Agent Sarah Morrison, who had seemed sympathetic during the initial breach,
now question me with professional detachment. Did your father ever ask about your work? Of course, parents ask about their children's jobs. What specifically did he ask? General things, how my day was, if I was stressed, normal parent questions. Did you ever discuss classified operations? Never. I know the rules. But Sarah's expression suggested she thought I was lying. The trust we had briefly shared during the chaos of the breach had evaporated. Now she was an investigator and I was a suspect. On the third day of the investigation, Jennifer Walsh called me. My best friend and colleague sounded terrified. Georgia, I need to tell you something. Internal Affairs just questioned me. Dread settled in my stomach. About what? About 3 weeks ago, your brother Daniel contacted me. He said he wanted to surprise you with a gift, something special. He asked about your schedule, when you worked from home, when you'd be at the office. I thought it was sweet, so I told him you usually work from home on Fridays. My breath caught. Fridays. My parents had broken into my house on Fridays. Jennifer, you didn't know. But that's not all. Her voice cracked. Internal Affairs thinks I'm part of this. They're suggesting I deliberately provided information to help facilitate the breach. They're investigating me too. Georgia, I could lose my job. I could go to prison. You won't. You were trying to help. You didn't know what Daniel was really doing. They don't believe me. They think there's a pattern. They're saying your entire network was leaking information. You, me, maybe others. They're tearing apart our whole team. After Jennifer hung up, I sat in my living room, still crowded with evidence markers and forensic equipment. I thought about the pattern investigators were building. From their perspective, it looked damning. A brother who asked about my schedule, a colleague who provided that information, a forgotten laptop at exactly the right time, parents who showed up when I wasn't home. If I didn't know the truth, I would suspect me too. The media coverage worsened each day. My face appeared on national news. Headlines screamed about Homeland Security breaches and intelligence analysts betraying their country. Reporters camped outside my house, shouting questions whenever I appeared. My neighbors stopped making eye contact. I received death threats on social media, hundreds of messages calling me a traitor, demanding I be executed. My entire reputation, everything I had built over 5 years of dedicated service, crumbled in 72 hours. I became the face of betrayal, and no amount of protesting my innocence made any difference. The court of public opinion had already convicted me. On the fourth night, I sat alone in my house, curtains drawn against the cameras outside, and I realized something. Waiting for the investigation to clear me wasn't enough. If I wanted to prove my innocence, I had to do it myself. I had to find the real story behind my father's betrayal and expose whoever was pulling the strings. I still had my skills. I still had my training. I might not have my badge, but I knew how to investigate. And I wasn't going to let someone destroy my life without fighting back. I started with Marcus Thornton. Without access to government databases, I had to rely on public information. But years of intelligence training had taught me how to find patterns in seemingly innocent data. I spent 18 hours straight searching through business records, property filings, corporate registries, and social media connections. Marcus owned 7 different companies, each with complex ownership structures involving shell corporations and offshore entities. But when I mapped out the connections, I found something interesting. 5 of Marcus's companies had contracts with defense contractors working on classified projects. 2 had foreign investors from countries known for intelligence operations against the United States. Marcus wasn't just a businessman. He was a node in a network designed to collect sensitive information from multiple access points. My father wasn't his only asset. Marcus had positioned himself to reach into different parts of the intelligence community, defense industry, and government operations. This was sophisticated, long-term intelligence work. But Marcus wasn't at the top. Someone was directing him, coordinating the operation. Someone with the resources and knowledge to run a network this complex. I thought about what my father had said. Marcus mentioned someone named Victor. I searched for Victor, connected to Marcus, to foreign intelligence, to operations on U.S. soil. The name Victor Vulov appeared repeatedly in intelligence reports I remembered from my work. He was a ghost, a suspected foreign intelligence officer operating in the United States. But there were no confirmed sightings, no photographs, no concrete evidence. He existed in rumors and suspicions. Then I remembered something that made my blood run cold. One of the files my parents had accessed on my laptop contained our intelligence on Victor Vulov. It listed suspected network members, safe house locations, contact methods, everything we knew about his operations. This was counterintelligence. And if Victor now knew everything in those files, he would start eliminating anyone who could identify him. Informants would disappear, witnesses would die. We were about to lose years of intelligence work, and people were going to be killed. I had to warn someone, but I was suspended. If I contacted my agency, they would think I was trying to manipulate the investigation. I needed proof. I decided to go to Dallas to find Daniel. My brother was at the center of this. If I could get him to tell me everything he knew about Marcus and Victor, I might piece together enough evidence to prove the real scope of this operation. I bought a plane ticket with cash, not wanting to create a digital trail. Flying to Dallas violated the order not to leave the city, but I didn't care anymore. My career was already destroyed. What mattered now was stopping Victor before more people died. Daniel's apartment was in a rundown complex on the east side of Dallas. I knocked on his door for 5 minutes before he finally answered. When he opened the door, I barely recognized him. My brother looked like he had aged 10 years in just a few months. He was thin, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes and yellowish tint to his skin. His hand shook. He had a fading bruise on his left cheek and his right hand was bandaged. "Georgia," he said, his voice breaking. "Oh, God, Georgia." He pulled me inside and immediately started crying, not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. I held my brother while he fell apart, rage building inside me at whoever had reduced him to this. When he finally calmed enough to speak, the story poured out of him. The gambling had never stopped. He had just gotten better at hiding it. Online poker, sports betting, high-stakes games in private rooms. He had lost everything. His savings, his retirement money, money borrowed from friends. Then he borrowed from people who didn't accept excuses or delays. The debt had grown to $1.2 million. The loan sharks weren't local criminals. They had connections to international organized crime. When Daniel couldn't pay, they took him to a warehouse. They broke two of his fingers with a hammer while filming it. Then they sent the video to my father. The next day, Marcus Thornton showed up. Daniel said Marcus knew everything about the debt, the threats, and the video. He seemed like a miracle. "What did he want in return?" I asked. "Information about you," Daniel said quietly. "Your schedule, your habits, your security measures." He said it was for a background check, some kind of enhanced security clearance review. It sounded official. I was desperate. I told him everything. "Did Marcus ever mention who he worked for?" Daniel nodded. "Once. I overheard him on the phone. He said a name, Victor. He said, 'Victor wants this done cleanly. No traces back to us.'" Victor Vulov. The confirmation I needed. "Daniel, you need to come with me. We have to report this to the FBI. Your testimony can help expose this entire operation." "I can't. If I talk, they'll kill me." "They'll kill you anyway," I replied. "Marcus doesn't leave witnesses. The only way you survive is if we bring down this entire network." Before Daniel could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know where you are. You should not have come to Dallas."
I looked out Daniel's window and saw a dark sedan parked across the street. 2 men sat inside, watching the building. "We need to leave, now." Daniel and I slipped out the back exit of his apartment, moving quickly through the parking lot. But the sedan was already in motion, circling around. Another car appeared, blocking our path. I grabbed Daniel's hand and ran. We cut through yards, jumped fences, and I tried to remember my field training for evasion. But it had been years, and Daniel was out of shape and terrified. The pursuers were professionals, keeping their distance, staying close enough to control our path. They were hurting us, driving us somewhere. We reached the shopping mall and ran inside, losing ourselves in the crowd. I pulled Daniel into a department store, then into a dressing room. We waited, listening to footsteps and muffled voices passing by. I checked my phone. No signal inside. We couldn't stay here. They'd eventually search every room. Then my phone vibrated again. This time, a message from Jennifer. "Georgia, where are you? Christopher is looking for you. He knows you left the city. There's a warrant for your arrest." A warrant? I was officially a fugitive now. Daniel looked at me, panic in his eyes. "What do we do?" "We run," I said, "and we figure out how to fight back." We stayed hidden in the dressing room for 45 minutes, listening to the hum of normal life outside. Store announcements, footsteps, laughter, ordinary people shopping while we hid from men who wanted to kill us. When the noise of pursuit faded, I led Daniel out through a side emergency exit. The alarm blared as we pushed through, but we didn't stop. We ran until we reached a residential neighborhood, then slowed to a walk. 2 people pretending to be out for a casual stroll. My phone rang. "Christopher Hayes." I hesitated, then answered. "Georgia, what are you doing in Dallas?" "I'm trying to find proof." "Christopher, this is bigger than my father. Victor Vulov is running a counterintelligence operation. He's going to start eliminating witnesses and informants now that he knows what we know about him." "Then come in," Christopher urged. "Report what you found. Let us handle it." "But I can't. There's a warrant for my arrest." "Yes, because you violated a direct order and fled the city. That looks extremely guilty, Georgia. You're making this worse for yourself. Or I'm the only one actually trying to stop what's happening." "Where are you right now?" he asked. I looked around, debating whether to tell him. Something in Christopher's voice felt off. Too calm, too controlled. "I need to go," I said, and hung up. Daniel and I walked for another 20 minutes until we reached a bus stop. We rode the bus downtown, then transferred to another heading towards the airport. I wasn't planning to fly anywhere, but airports were crowded, public, harder for anyone to make a move without witnesses. That's when I saw it. The same dark sedan, 3 vehicles behind the bus. "They're following us still," I whispered. "How? How do they keep finding us?" Daniel asked. "My phone, of course. They were tracking it. I should have realized sooner." I yanked out the SIM card and tossed it out the bus window, then powered down the phone completely. We got off at the next stop and ducked into a convenience store. I bought a prepaid phone with cash, while Daniel kept watch by the window. As I activated it, a black SUV pulled up outside. 2 men stepped out, scanning the street. We bolted out the back door, through an alley, and emerged onto a busy road. I hailed a cab and gave the driver an address across town. We needed to get far away, somewhere to regroup. The cab dropped us at a small motel, the kind that accepted cash and didn't ask questions. I paid for a room and we locked ourselves inside. Daniel sat on the bed, his head in his hands. "This is my fault," he said. "All of it. If I hadn't gambled, if I'd gotten help instead of borrowing from criminals, none of this would have happened. Dad wouldn't be in jail. You wouldn't have lost your job. People wouldn't die because of me. Victor Vulov would have found another way in," I said softly. "If it wasn't you, it would have been someone else. These operations target vulnerabilities. They're patient.
They wait for the right opening. My new phone rang, an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Georgia," Sarah Morrison said from a familiar voice.
I was still panicking about my parents and about how Daniel had shut me down so quickly. Instead of focusing on finding Victor's network, he had launched an investigation into me. I told him we needed proof, and he agreed, warning me how dangerous the situation was. If Christopher really was the mole, he had access to everything: our investigative methods, safe houses, and entire system, which meant he would always be one step ahead of us. Before I could say anything more, there was a sharp knock at the door. Sarah immediately drew her weapon and peeked through the peephole. Her body stiffened. It was Christopher. His voice came from the other side, calm but firm, calling my name and asking me to open the door. 2 agents stood outside with him, which meant we were trapped. Sarah and I exchanged a glance. She opened the door slowly, gun raised. Christopher stood there unarmed, but his face was cold and calculating, nothing like the warm mentor I once trusted. He asked to come in, but Sarah ordered him to stay where he was. He smirked, mocking her confidence, and said we had no proof against him. My voice trembled as I asked him why he had betrayed his country and me. His expression softened slightly as he confessed that he never meant for me to get hurt. I had simply been a tool for his mission. He revealed how his gambling debts had made him vulnerable years ago and how Victor had exploited that weakness. Sarah declared him under arrest, but Christopher only smiled, saying we had nothing on him. Suddenly, the window behind us shattered, and gas canisters rolled inside, filling the room with thick smoke. Chaos erupted, shouting, gunfire, confusion. I felt hands grab me, dragging me toward the door before everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the back of a moving vehicle with my hands zip-tied. Daniel sat beside me, terrified. Across from us sat Christopher, calm and composed. He said he was taking us somewhere quiet to talk. He told us that if we cooperated by claiming my father acted alone and pleading negligence, we could walk free in a few years while he continued working with Victor. I glared at him, telling him that people died because of his actions, but he only replied coldly that death was simply part of intelligence work. The vehicle stopped in the abandoned warehouse district. We were dragged inside where Marcus Thornton and 3 other men were waiting. They tied us to metal chairs, and Christopher crouched in front of me, giving me one last chance to cooperate or disappear. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. He looked confused. There were security alerts from his house. The FBI had executed another search warrant. Marcus claimed everything was clean, but his nervous expression told me otherwise. That's when I realized the truth. My father had been working against them all along. He had hidden something in my house, evidence that would expose them. When Marcus confirmed that the FBI had found a USB drive hidden in my jewelry box, I told them it contained everything: their meetings, their payments, and their deals with Victor. Panic spread instantly. Christopher and Marcus began shouting at each other, and the others raised their weapons in fear. I used the distraction to twist my hands free from the zip ties. Then a gunshot rang out. Everyone froze. In the doorway stood Sarah, her arm bleeding, but her gun steady. She yelled for everyone to drop their weapons, announcing that the FBI and Homeland Security had surrounded the building. Sirens wailed outside as red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Christopher's face twisted with rage as I told him it was over. He reached for his gun, but Sarah shot first.
Agents swarmed in, arresting everyone. Sarah rushed to free Daniel and me, and we held each other tightly, shaking with relief. Paramedics treated Sarah's wound, and I watched as Christopher was carried out on a stretcher, handcuffed and defeated. Watching him go, I whispered softly, "Christopher, you taught me everything, but you forgot one thing. Never betray the truth."
Guards surrounded the area. Marcus and his associates were cuffed and led away. Agent Palmer approached me, his expression apologetic. "Ms. Georgia, I owe you an apology. We found the USB drive your father hid. The evidence on it is comprehensive. It proves everything: your innocence, Christopher's betrayal, and the entire Viktor Vulov network. You were right all along." I learned later that my father had spent 2 years pretending to cooperate with Marcus while secretly recording everything. He had documented meetings, copied files, and traced financial transactions. He had known that Christopher was the inside man, but needed proof before exposing him. The break-in at my house had been the trigger. My father hid the USB drive, then deliberately triggered the security alert. He knew it would start an investigation and that internal affairs would dig deep. Eventually, they would find the drive and everything would unravel. He had sacrificed himself, his freedom, and his relationship with his daughter to expose the conspiracy. And it worked. The next 3 weeks moved like a whirlwind. Christopher Hayes, Marcus Thornton, and 7 other individuals were arrested and charged with espionage, conspiracy, and dozens of related federal crimes. The USB drive my father had hidden contained evidence of a spy network operating within U.S. intelligence agencies for over 8 years. Viktor Vulov himself was arrested in a coordinated international operation. The intelligence found on my laptop, combined with my father's recordings, gave law enforcement everything they needed to locate and apprehend him. He had been living under a false identity in Maryland, posing as a consultant for technology companies, all while running his intelligence network. The evidence exonerated me completely. Internal Affairs issued a formal apology. My suspension was lifted, and my badge and weapon were returned. The agency offered me a promotion and a commendation for my role in exposing the conspiracy. I declined. I needed time. Time to process what had happened, time to heal, time to understand who I was beyond my job. My father was released from custody, all charges dropped. When I saw him walk out of the detention center, I ran to him and held him for a long time. He had lost weight, and his hair had gone grayer. But when he looked at me, I saw my father again. Not the operative, not the spy, just the man who had raised me. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for everything." "You saved lives, Dad. You exposed a network that would have kept operating for years. You stopped Viktor. I almost destroyed you in the process, but you didn't. You trusted me to figure it out. You trusted me to be strong enough to handle it." My mother, Linda, had a harder time processing everything. She had believed she was helping her daughter understand her work, only to discover her husband had been running a counterintelligence operation without telling her. She felt betrayed and used. They went to counseling, working through the deception, the secrets, and the way the past 2 years had all been a lie. Daniel entered a residential rehabilitation program for gambling addiction. He also faced legal consequences for his role in providing information about me, though his sentence was reduced significantly because of his cooperation and status as a victim. He had a long road ahead, but was finally confronting his addiction instead of running from it. Sarah Morrison and I became close friends. She had been shot protecting me and had risked her career to investigate the truth when everyone else accepted the easy narrative. We met for coffee once a week, sometimes talking about the case, sometimes just enjoying normal conversations about books, movies, and ordinary life. Jennifer Walsh was fully cleared of any wrongdoing.
She returned to work, but the experience had shaken her. She told me she would never again give out information without carefully considering the consequences, no matter how innocent the request seemed. 3 months after the arrests, I returned to work at Homeland Security. I requested a transfer to a different division, a fresh start, away from the people and places that reminded me of Christopher's betrayal. My new supervisor, a woman named Patricia Daniels, welcomed me warmly and gave me interesting cases to work on. But I had changed. I no longer trusted blindly. I questioned more, verified information multiple times, and looked for patterns and connections others might miss. The experience had made me better at my job, but it had also made me more cautious, more guarded. One evening, 6 months after everything ended, my family gathered for dinner at my parents' house in Dallas. It was the first time we had all been together since the arrests. The atmosphere was tentative at first, everyone careful with their words, uncertain of the boundaries. My mother had cooked my favorite meal, pot roast with vegetables. Daniel looked healthier, 90 days sober, his eyes clearer than I had seen them in years. My father seemed older, but more at peace, as if exposing the conspiracy had lifted a weight he had carried for so long. We ate and talked about small things at first: my mother's garden, Daniel's new job at a nonprofit, my father's plans to volunteer at a veterans organization. Normal family conversation. Then my father raised his glass. I want to propose a toast to family. We've been through something that should have destroyed us, but we're still here, still together, still fighting for each other. We clinked glasses, and in that moment, I felt something shift. We weren't going to pretend the past hadn't happened or act like everything was fine, but we were choosing to move forward together, to rebuild trust slowly, to forgive the painful choices made under impossible circumstances. I looked around the table at my family, flawed, complicated, human, and realized something important. Perfection wasn't the goal. Understanding was. Forgiveness was. Growth was. We all made mistakes. My father had kept secrets that nearly destroyed us. Daniel had made terrible choices driven by addiction. My mother had trusted when she should have questioned. And I had been so focused on my job that I missed the warning signs in my own family. But we had also shown courage. My father had risked everything to expose corruption. Daniel had finally confronted his addiction. My mother was learning to ask hard questions. I had fought back when everything seemed lost. The intelligence world is built on secrets, on compartmentalization, on trusting your team while suspecting everyone else. But I learned that sometimes the most dangerous betrayals come from the people you trust most. And sometimes the greatest acts of loyalty look like betrayal until you see the whole picture. My father had taught me that lesson. He had looked like a traitor while actually being a hero. He had let me hate him, let me believe the worst, because he knew that eventually the truth would emerge. He had faith in me, in the system, in justice. That faith had been tested. We had all been tested, but we had survived. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I thought about the question I had asked myself in those dark days when I was suspended and hunted. Was I strong enough to handle this? Did I have what it took to fight back against forces so much bigger than me? The answer was yes, but not because I was special or extraordinarily brave. Because when pushed to the edge, when everything was stripped away, I discovered I had something more important than skills or training. I had principles I was not willing to compromise. I had a sense of right and wrong that guided me even when the path was unclear. And I had people who loved me enough to sacrifice for me. That was the real lesson. Strength doesn't come from being invincible. It comes from being willing to stand up, even when you're terrified, even when you're not sure you can win, even when everyone has turned against you. I had stood up, I had fought, and I had won. Not just the investigation or the case,